All right, we are moving on to a big chunk of the conversation. This one is episode 21 from the 52 Weeks of Reefing. This one is called LED Reef Lighting, LEDs, tuning par, spread, and spectrum is what we called that one back in 52 Weeks in 2015. Mm-hmm. Lot of evolutionary knowledge gained over those last almost decade.
Good, yeah. Since 2015, we learned a lot, man. Yeah. There's so many new things and ways to think about it. So I think you'll come along for the ride here. The big one, probably we already mentioned earlier, was about shadowing, but core belief here. This is the core belief. I'm curious if you guys will chime in on this one, if you feel like this is true. But this to me kind of solidifies everything that's like right and wrong with LEDs and where we need to go. LEDs are the solution to all the problems that we just talked about. So LEDs are the solution, but we're making something easy really hard. I'm going to say it again. LEDs are the solution, but we're making something easy really hard.
The solution being the sky, the sun, the caustic lines, these types of things.
Lower par, no heat, not gigantic. Like looks elegant on the outside of the tank, looks awesome in the tank. I don't have all of the heat challenges. I don't have bulb challenges. I don't have hazardous waste challenges. I can tune the color that it's visually appealing. I can do all of these things.
But we're making it so hard.
Yeah, man. Like it is the solution to a better world. But man, are we making it really, really hard because we're not designing to the application. I think we're designing to what people want to buy.
Yeah, and we'll soon find that doesn't help
our
pets.
What matters most? This piece is lighting to the application, number one. So lighting to the application can mean a few different things. Like we're lighting to photosynthesis, we're lighting to LPS, we're lighting to SPS. And I think I'm going to leave it mostly in this conversation to the last two things. Like, so when people, say, hey, you should buy this light, it's the Razor's the best, the AI Prime's the best, the Red Sea Reef LED is the best, the Radion's the best, a lot of it's all like, brand identification. Yeah. Like I love that brand. Me and that brand, I don't know.
I spent that money on that brand and then now they're the best.
Yeah, purchase defense, research defense. But the reality is we're lighting to an application, meaning if I'm going to light to a LPS tank, I don't need 350 par. I certainly don't need 600 par. Yeah. I need 50 to 150, and because a lot of the large polyps there are actually capable of moving and exposing different tissue to light in different ways, it's not as important about shadowing until they get bigger as well. In fact, shadowing in this case may actually create a really high contrasty kind of cool look for an LPS or softy or polyp tank, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, lighting to the application, if I want a SPS tank, meaning wall-to-wall SPS, just a, Crayola box of color, well, you know what? Now, I need end-to-end light, man. Horizon to horizon. These things are branching corals. They grow fast. They shade their neighbors. They shade their insides. They will die if you don't. So if you do not consider that factor in some fashion, and there's different ways to get horizon to horizon using LEDs, which we'll share in just a minute. It's not just one big giant panel of light. But if you don't consider that with SPS and the fact that I need to be 350 par, well, we missed the application. So
of course it didn't work.
The advice needs to actually kind of match that when people are asking like, hey, what light should I use? They're like, well, what are you going to use it on? Give me a size of the tank. What kind of coral are you going to put in there?
How far along are your corals? Like how old is your tank? Because maybe I'm switching, maybe I have nubbins or maybe I have colonies. That's going to budget. Those are all choices that are going to affect your decision on what lighting option to recommend.
Yeah, like, so if you're going to throw a bunch of zoanthids in the bottom of like 18 cube and somebody told you to buy an XR30,
you're silly.
Wow, that person's advice is terrible, man. I don't know. But if you were going to light a 180-gallon tank and somebody told you to use 3 XR30s, like turn sideways to get front to back, excellent choice. Like these are the widest angle lights that we have tested.
Yeah.
Excellent choice, man. So what matters most isn't the brand, isn't the output, isn't all this stuff. It's identifying what it is you're trying to do and then go find the right tool for the job.
Also, next thing that matters most is, this is an old Pontiac commercial, I believe it was. Wider is better. Leverage the glass, unless you need to mount it high. Wider is better, meaning like my 180-degree beam versus 55-degree beam. My 206-degree angle from a bunch of multiple lights on one little piece versus, again, my 55-degree narrow beam. And then when you do have that wide 200-degree, 180-degree beam, what that does is now shoots light towards the edges of the glass. And what we've found recently with the water-filled boxes of glass is it reflects back in and very little light actually comes out of the tank.
Almost none. And so I cannot think of an application in reefing other than high mounting where wider lenses don't perform better. And so if anybody's using lenses to focus the lights into beams, the only reason that you would want to do that is because you're going to mount the lights pretty high, or you're trying to win a marketing battle with a par meter. That's really it. If you want to produce a light that is going to illuminate a tank evenly and support the growth of coral,
the wider the
lenses, the better, man. In fact, in many cases, no lens actually performs better than lenses. All right, another one is what matters most is a blanket coverage can be achieved in a variety of ways.
Yes.
I mean, blanketing the coral, the aquascape, and everything in light, 360 horizon to horizon, can be achieved in a bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to be achieved in the way that we did it 20 years ago. So the first one
is a grid of wide-angle floodlights. Wide-angle floodlights similar to like what's the biggest one that comes to mind? Kessel A360X, right? It's a single point of light in the chip that's about the size of my thumb, less than the size of a quarter, but it has a 180-degree beam angle. So it's a wide angle floodlight. So if I put one in the tank, I'm obviously going to have shadows over here because there's no light coming from this side. Same thing on this side, or it's not 360-degree coverage. But when I start putting multiples in front and in back and all around, now I'm intersecting all of those wide-angle lights. I can get it done with less wide-angle floodlights than a whole bunch of spotlights because the intersecting points of lights is much greater with 180-degree lenses. But that is one way to get the coast-to-coast coverage. The horizon-to-horizon, use multiple wide-angle floods.
Yeah, you're like creating overlapping cones of light, right? They come from different angles.
Yeah, you can think of a narrow beam 55-degree angle as this small cone that does this, but 180 as this big giant cone that spreads quick.
Okay, so there's one caveat to this one, which is most of the lighting, like dispersion, like the sizing, like this light covers a 2-foot area, is done in an open box, not in an aquascape. So it's done in either open in the air or in a glass box filled with water. But in either case, it's done in a manner which doesn't account for the fact that there's obstructions, the aquascape, the corals itself, the neighbors, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, in a totally unobstructed environment, those overlapping cones of light will create an even amount of light. In a world where there's obstructions, it probably isn't over a 2-foot grid. You're probably going to move them closer to like 18 inches.
Right.
So if I'm going to make a grid of super wide angle floodlights, most cases spacing them about 18 inches apart is going to have a better result than spacing them 2 feet apart. Now, one of the things you got to calculate though is, so like with the Kessel 360 or the 500, is the point of light is about 1.5 inches or so big, whereas like something with a XR30, the point of light is like probably 10 or 11 inches big.
Yeah.
So like when I either turn them side to side or I space them, I probably only need them 18 inches from each other, not from the center of the light point,
right.
Or from the edge of the light point rather. So it is as big as the object if I'm going to use multiple modules. So if I got 1 inch light source, probably 18 inches apart from each other, a little less depending on how you orient a bigger light source as well.
You can also get this blanket coverage done with a large panel.
You know, before we move on to that one, actually, one of my favorites, even though it's a lot of cords, and one of the cheapest ways to create those overlapping light source is actually the grid of the AI primes.
10 AI primes. We did it over a 120-gallon 4-foot by 2-foot tank. We were in our SPS dominated zone. And when you calculate the 10 AI primes compared to like 4 or 6 other lights, bigger fixture lights, it actually winds up being a little cheaper.
Yeah, we found like one AA prime actually illuminated a 2-foot area enough for LPS.
Yeah.
Like a little $200 light that's this big.
60 cubic.
Yeah, and then like let's pretend I had an LPS tank with a 120. I mean, that means you could get away with 2 of those. But what if I want to go now to a mixed tank? Well, now I could go to 4 of them. I'm creating those overlapping cones of light. Now when I want to go super duper SPS, front to back, cover it, I need to make those overlapping light. I could get 6 of those things and have them cover roughly about 14 inches a piece, right? And now, you know, it's kind of a versatile tool in that manner, where if I want to create this, it won't be the exact same thing as having that blanket of light from an object that is larger than the thing it's trying to illuminate, being, you know, T5 grid or whatever in there. But like, it's pretty damn close if you think about it that way. If you just put 2 lights on it 2 feet away from each other, and you think in an unobstructed environment that they would overlap, well, yeah, sure. But when in an environment that has shadowing in it from the corals and the aquascape, absolutely won't do that. Shouldn't expect it to. And there's a bunch of different ways to solve that.
Yeah.
So next one.
So we're talking about how you can build this blanket coverage and how you can achieve it using LEDs. And another way to do it is just build a large panel. Just a large panel of LED. The Philips Coral Care, one of the first to actually approach it in this manner. You know, the Radions of the world, the G5s, the Neptune Skies of the world. Their form factor is getting larger and larger and larger. I don't know, I could see someday, the ATI Stratton's another one. I could see someday maybe we get back to like a 48-inch by 2-foot LED panel that is similar to T5s. I don't know.
You know, one of the grids that we didn't talk about, I don't know if it was in here actually, is a grid of LED strips. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, you take the LED.
The next one.
Oh, is that really
that's
the next one?
That's how we make it with the next one.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so the grid, the wide angle floodlights. So, yeah.
Large panel.
And the large panel. So, when I first saw the Philips light, I'm like, oh, there it is.
There it is.
There's somebody finally decided to make this thing.
Yeah.
Now, the only problem is it's like 20-some pounds or something. You know?
The first
bunch of cords.
Gen 1 was just heavy, yeah.
Even Gen 2 is heavy.
Gen 2 is heavy. But they're like passively cooled.
There's lots of awesome things. Passively cooled, really robust. I think it's various degrees of waterproof. But, man, it's super heavy, and it's going over a tank, man. Like, most people don't really want to mount it to the ceiling. And like, it's got all these extra cords coming out of it. And actually, the ratio of LEDs of white to blue, there's like way more white than anybody ever used, which means that like I end up not getting the par that I wanted out of it because I'm turning half these things way, way, way down, right? Yeah. So that was the Sky. The Sky is a very similar light to that one, has the same technology in it, but is designed to the applications that of being a warehouse light, in my mind, designed to be above an aquarium. Or a repurposed warehouse light, I should say. But also then you got the Stratton, like a super thin form factor. I can't help but wonder if 5 years from now you're going to see
a Stratton that's 48 inches long,
just
or
panels,
60-something inches long,
just
or
panels that go over the tanks, because
3 or 4 of them.
There's no question that works. It's one and done. I put it on the top of the tank, I let it go, I'm done. Right? Legs now work and stuff. I don't know.
Get back to the T5 days. But
yeah, but large panel is definitely another way. So overlapping wide angle floodlights.
That one makes
large panel.
Large panel makes sense because T5s are where large panel metal halides.
It's really easy to make
giant,
the connection.
Yeah, those are large panel.
It's easy to make the connection too that the large panel like the sky from Neptune is like
if I'm a little coral nubbin down here.
Well, it's about the same size as the reflector of a halide.
Yeah.
You can really kind of start to see why these things would work together. Same thing as if I had a grid of 6 of those LED strips. I'm going to cover the same level of area.
Well, that's the next way that you can create blanketed coverage that we're talking about. The third way of creating blanketed coverage is a whole bunch of LED strips. This is one that we found we were doing some investigative testing. I tested one individual Reef Bright strip, like a 50-50, and come to find out that it actually has better spread and higher par than a single T5 bulb. And now what happens when you put those in a whole bunch of them, a bracket of them, like you would like a 6-bulb T5 fixture. Well, basically, I just built an LED style T5 fixture. It's just strips of LEDs, 6 of them, make it 48 inches long, hang it over the tank, and guess what? Magically, I now have a full blanket coverage of light.
If I had to say there was like the most underrepresented, poorly understood option of lighting the tank is that. It's those LED strips put on a bracket. And I say that because we didn't understand it.
Yeah, Orphic has it, Philips, or Reef Bright has it.
But very few people they use these strips as accent lights instead of as the primary, meaning like if I put these strips in there, I can just use a bracket, use 3 of them for LPS, and if I want SPS, I can use 6 of them. And in fact, we found that the LED strips, not only the individual ones, like you said, as a wider angle than the T5 bulbs and their reflector, but when we put, I think it was 5 of them on the bracket from Reef Bright, it actually had the widest dispersion, most even light of all the things that we tested. And again, basically end to end on one end, almost end to end the other end. Almost horizon to horizon, no doubt. Understand why it works.
I could understand why some bracketed LED strips would actually should be a top choice for some people. In that, rather than being tied to the spacing of LEDs in a fixture by the manufacturer, I can actually I don't have my bracket doesn't have to be with the LEDs side by side like this. I can actually make a bracket that they're spaced out a little more. Make a bracket that they're spaced out or more spaced out. So now I'm changing the point of intersection for all of these lights, getting a wider, more even coverage from multiple LED strips.
Absolutely. All right, and so of those are the 3 options really to get a blanket of light. Is I can use a bunch of LED strips, combine them together. I could have one object that's large, like close to as large as the object you're trying to illuminate, or closer to that anyway. Or I can have a bunch of wide-angle intersecting cones of light that overlap each other. Any one of those things is going to achieve it. And so when
we have to remember that we need to be trying to achieve that blanket of light.
You have to want that to begin with.
Yeah.
But this is the pieces. You guys are probably watching well, which one should I do? Which one should I do? Whichever one speaks to you, because they're all going to work. And that's a piece up here is a core belief is LEDs are the solution, but we're making something easy really hard. Right? And so, don't spend all day thinking about this. And I will say that the manufacturers haven't helped. Part of it is they tell you 24 inches because they want to market it as that because it makes it seem like it's cheaper or something. And they're a little afraid to tell you, hey man, actually, if you're looking wall-to-wall SPS, dude, 18 inches would be better. But that's what we want to know. I want to be told what is going to help me succeed, not what I think is advice that's going to make me buy something that isn't going to help me achieve my goal, right? So we're making something as a community that should be easy, hard. Any one of those solutions, overlapping cones, a big panel, or even LED strips combined. Any of those things, horizon to horizon skylight. All right.
We also think that matters most about LEDs is that the best LED options will produce a cohesive blended spectrum. This gets back to the emulating the sky, the sun, the caustic lines, the filtration of the filtration of the spectrum as it goes through the water. You don't see bright red, bright green, bright UV, individual caustic beams in the ocean. The best LED options will also not have that. They will have a blended, cohesive spectrum.
Again, this is a debatable topic. People will debate this all day long, how important it is, because again, we're actually, when I have that cluster of LEDs, what I'm doing is creating overlapping cones of different spectrum, and hopefully in the middle, it all blends together. But I'm not doing that in an actual reef environment, which the red bounces off of the caustic or the ripples in the surface. The ripples in the surface create a lens, focus the light, and shoot little laser beams of red, blue, and white and all this stuff all over the place. So here's the piece. I mean, you can debate all day how important it is, but if we're talking about the best options will produce a cohesive blended spectrum, 100 out of 100 reefers, if I put them all next together and said, do you want all the little, if I can see the little things of red, blue, and green and whatever shooting all over the tank, or do you want the one that is perfectly blended, got all of it, isn't shooting spectrum hotspots all over the place? 100 per 100 out of reefers will say, I would pick that one if cost wasn't the issue. Now you're buying some of the technology along the way for sure that achieve better results than other things, but nobody will say it is unimportant and I would never want that. It's just a matter of, is it worth the cost to achieve that technology? Another is what matters most. The best options won't have visual technology artifacts, right? So T5s didn't really T5s had a visual technology artifact, which is the super flat, low contrast look.
It's part of that technology.
Really tealy. It had some artifacts of the types of technology that was used. Halides, the only problem I ever had with halides is sometimes if you used too much of the reflector banks on it, it would actually create its own type of disco, because there'd be the little point of light is reflecting off of too many surfaces, and it would be just too shimmery as well. But in this case with LEDs, there's all kinds of visual technology artifacts.
One of the most commonly referred to as disco ball effect or crosshatch, or this is something if you take a white background, you put some flow in a tank and you put your LED above it, and you look down at the bottom on that white thing, all you see is this TV static screen crosshatch rainbow of colors. Or you look through your aquascape down in the bottom and you see this one point of light that's just steady green, steady red down there. That's a technology artifact.
So technology artifact, I'd say with my favorite shimmer producer, the Kessel, on its own is really hard-edged shimmer. It's got a lot of really hard edges to it, and it's really busy looking. It doesn't look like disco, and it doesn't look like TV static, but it's got a hard-edged shimmer to it. It's one of the things I really enjoy about that light, but I like to soften it with other light, so a diffused T5 or diffused LEDs or T5 bulbs, where it softens it. And if you think about the ocean, if you took away the skylight and you only had the sun shooting off the shimmer lines, it'd be the same thing.
Sharp shimmer lines.
Super sharp, really, really harsh looking lines in the ocean. It's the fact that the sky's coming in and diffusing it all and softens the overall look. So that's the same thing that happens in a reef tank. Now, another thing that you'll see in Artifact is, especially with the lights that use narrow angle lenses, is you'll see the little bits of green and red and stuff shooting all over the place, like little ants all over the place. And it looks disco-y because a disco has a mirrored effect to it, and the mirrored effect brings color into it, and so it just looks all weird. But even worse than that to me is when you have a grid of undiffused LEDs. So a big, huge sheet of LEDs that are undiffused, or often even sometimes the light bars, is it gives us this weird staticky look. There's just so many single points of light that they're overlapping each other so much that if you look closely, it just looks like fuzz and TV static and flashy.
And that's not only two mixed LED colors. I think the one that we kind of saw this fuzz on its own was like you said, LED strips. Single color, one LED color in the entire strip. Put multiples of those together, and you look at the shimmer, and you're like, man, that is really staticky looking. Something weird about the way that those single points of light.
So many, hundreds of single light points may create. So there's no longer like a shimmer line. It's just kind of like fuzz. There's like a sense of movement, but it's just kind of like literally like watching a TV static.
We're kind of lucky here because we get to see all of these different things. Like we can plug in the light and go look at it.
See them all.
Trying to explain it.
I'd actually say that we're unlucky because once you know what good looks like,
once you see
the other thing everywhere else.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? All right, so the best options won't, and this is like, you can debate how important all these things are, but if you're talking about the best option, the best options won't have visual technology artifacts. I think 100 out of 100 reefers will tell you that.
Yeah.
Okay, so also what matters most, the number of options and configurations means that there'll never be the same ease of use. Par meter is important. Meaning,
there's so many brands, so many styles of LED, wide angle flood, spotlights, big, large diffused panels. There's so many choices to choose from. Not as easy as like there was two main T5 light manufacturers. You picked one and you put bulbs in it. There was only 6 bulbs. We talked about this in the last T5 episode. There was like 6 or 7 bulb combo choices to choose from, and you throw it all together and then you light your reef. Here, there's not only just a whole bunch of like dozens and dozens of manufacturers of LEDs and the types that they make. There's also the spectrum of each LED or the diodes that they choose for their specific light. There's the control that you have. Some have 8 channels of control. Some have 4 channels of control. The options are like limitless.
Old days. Buy a ATI, SunPower, buy a tech fixture, here's the bulb configuration, plug it in the wall, you're done.
Easy.
Today, all that garbage you just said. Like, there's so many things, man. We'll never, and there's so many new ones coming out, we'll never ever settle on something as simple as use 4 bulbs and call it a day. Yeah. And so that is why a par meter is so important today. Yes. Just set it up. Get it into the range you want. You're caring for some animals in here. They live in certain ranges. The human eye doesn't do it well. Again, you can pick one up for $200, or you can actually buy one from us, and this is one of those rare instances we'll let you use it and then return it with a restocking fee in 2 months.
Yeah.
Use it and perfect your system. Share it with your friends. Share the cost with them, and then return it to us. We just want to make it easier for you to be able to set these things up perfect.
And now, didn't really need that with T5s and metal halides because they were so plug and play.
Yeah.
The standard hanging or leg mounts and things like that made it. I don't need to test par. I just need to put some bulbs in there and go.
By the way, you can also buy a slightly used one because those things go into open box if you want, and pick up a slightly used one for 20% off as well.
Par meter.
Make it easy though. Another thing here, what matters most, if I had to pick one single light that is the collective best, right? And so that's the one thing that everybody is asking.
What's the best light?
And wondering. Yeah. And sometimes I avoid this kind of conversation because it just tends to piss everybody off, like everyone involved. But the answer, you guys want to know the answer of what we believe here, so I'm just going to give it to you anyway. If I had to pick one single LED light that is the collective best, it's probably the Radion, right? It's the widest angle light we found. We found it mounted as little as like it was 8 inches off the tank. Yep. That on a 24-inch grid, the outside edges is within 20% of the center. It's dispersing the light perfectly over that area. Nothing else hit that. It has the widest spectrum, the most control over the spectrum. It has proven spectrums from people like Worldwide Corals, as well as the Canadian farm. I'm forgetting their name. But they've done actual like coral labs on this thing. It has the biggest offering of the blue spectrum. The diffuser blends the spectrum. The lenses actually don't create the focus points. They've already been on part of the wide angle piece of this for so long. There's clean mounting options for it. The software, no question, is the best in the industry. There's 25-inch spacing, probably for LPS with the XR15s. And then for SPS, probably 18-inch spacing with the XR30s turned sideways, getting that front to back. So if I had to pick one single light, not a single light out of here will do everything well. But if I had to pick one and somebody asked me, which one does it the best?
Which one would you put on your grandma's tank?
If I asked her, if she was asking me for all the things that we just talked about, I would tell her that that is probably the one, right? This is the easiest one to achieve the success with, cares about the most things. But there are people that care about very specific things. And so the next thing I will say is, well, what about the sky? Right? So what about the Neptune sky? Because you're talking about that's the new one. How does that fit in the equation? And I'd say that the sky is what I'm using on my own tank.
Yeah, I use the Radion, he uses the sky.
Okay, if you don't mind the size of the panel, the size of the panel, man, is the solution to shadowing.
Yeah.
I have a hood. I don't mind the size of the panel. I don't even see it.
You can't see anything under it anyway.
And so, I know that all of my most successful tanks have had horizon to horizon lighting like this one, right? I know that. I know that's where success lies. And so I don't care about the size of the light. And so that's why I have those. And then I use the Kessels in there to add shimmer. So not a single light is going to do everything that I specifically want.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And I got a lot of quartz, man, and it's nerdy application of the whole thing, but it is also, doing the things that I want it to do. So if you don't mind the size of the fixture, solution for shadowing, if I had to pick the balance between quality and affordability with LED modules, though, it would be the Prime.
I mean, that was a dark horse in the whole lighting testing that we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, is seeing this little tiny 55-watt AI Prime full little spectrum LED. And when I put it to the test in like an 18-inch cube, a 24-inch cube, the 60-gallon cube, and then you ran it through the test of the 120 and multiple fixtures. This thing is so versatile that, like you said, maybe I'm starting my journey. Maybe I got little nubbins, and as we said episodes ago, like you have to change and evolve with the growth of your tank. This is one of those LED lights, the AI Primes, that I can actually do that, stay in the same ecosphere of light that I have. So I'm buying AI Primes, and then I'm adding more AI Primes as my nubbins get bigger or as my tank desires change. But this is one of those ones where I can get it done without the upfront initial cost of buying like all of the Radions to do the same thing or the Skies to do the same thing. It can grow with me, but it's capable of reaching those just by adding multiple fixtures.
So in that spirit, my grandma asked me and said, hey, I don't want to break the bank today, but I'm willing to get something decent that will grow with my tank and my needs, and I can pick things up over time that help me. AI Prime all the way. And the reason, and because of all that, don't be surprised that AI Prime is the number one LED module that we sell here at BRS that you guys are buying.
We have the numbers.
So you guys are voting for it with your own dollars as a community. The AI Prime is the number one light source that you guys pick up.
Yeah.
So not surprised there. So some direct advice there from somebody who's tried all of those things many times, tested them in a ton of different environments. If I had to pick and answer that question to the best of my ability, that's how I would answer that question. So some hard lessons with LED reef lighting, tuning par, spread, and spectrum. So we got a better understanding of how we use LEDs, but what are some hard lessons?
First hard lesson is there are LEDs that are made, there's what sells, there's what looks awesome, and then there's what grows corals. There's LED, when you talk about like features and function and aesthetics and things like that, you can get lights that are made to sell, you can get lights that are made to look awesome, and you can get lights that are actually just made to grow corals.
So I'm gonna give you like a little behind the scenes here. Like there's a bunch of different things that sells an LED. One, like if you show me a picture of a big giant panel on top of a tank, and then you show me these two really sleek little modules, and you didn't tell me any other information, just said which one do you want? Well, I want the two sleek little modules, man. Like, but I don't know the conversation about shadowing. Yeah. I don't know the conversation about the sky, the summer, the sun, and the caustic lines. I don't know what makes a good light source for a photosynthetic organism that requires me to know those things, actually.
You're making a decision based on your own personal desires and not what's best for your pets.
Yeah, so like I asked people a while ago what was the most important thing to a light source. You know, was it spectrum, spread, mounting, easy use, blah, blah, blah.
Looks good.
50% of them actually said that it comes with the easy to use mounting
mounting option.
Mounting option.
Yeah.
The number one thing for half of the people was that it has a mounting option. And I totally get it after they say that, because if I can't mount it reasonably on the tank, it's totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah, it doesn't
if I don't want to drill holes in the ceiling and support 20-pound lights above my tank, it's totally irrelevant to me. If I don't have a wall bracket, you don't have that option, you don't have a hood option, it's just totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really easy. But you know what, like from a manufacturer's perspective is, you know, it's really easy is if we make one little module that serves all purposes and sits on a shelf in really small form factor and there's only one SKU.
It sells.
And it just so happens that people want to buy that as well. Well, we'll just make that. That's just the way the world works, right? Mm-hmm. But if you guys say, no, I want a different option, or I want to use them differently, and you make it okay to say, hey, yes, space at 18 inches for SPS, well, man, that is what they're going to do, and that is the advice they're going to give. So there's what sells, there's what looks awesome, and then there's what grows corals. Those things might not be all the same, but they should be.
Yeah, and there are some that do that bridge a lot of the gaps. I mean, we just talked about the AI Prime that is our #1 seller. Mm-hmm. It also, you know, I actually think that grid of 8 to 10 with primes. The primes with the aluminum framing that we kind of built. If you were actually kind of DIY that up, it actually looked pretty cool, minus the big giant rat's nest cord. But it grows corals for sure.
And the current evolution has totally changed. I mean, you see it in the radions, right? Like the fact that we shifted all the way from par wars to the primary concern is that the outside edges of that 24-inch square, only 6 inches deep in the tank, is within 20% of the very center. Means there's no more hot spots, man.
I can use all of the LED channels to 100% because so I'm not just buying channels that I don't even use just to get par. Yeah.
And that was like we didn't put this one down, but that was an interesting component that I never saw coming when we did like the little showdown.
Yep.
That with the radions, they actually had one of the lowest cost per par. Yeah. Right. So that's like everybody debates like what is the best LED, what costs the most, and like you're looking at like price points of $400 and $600 and $800 or $200, whatever it is, and you don't really think about, though, when we averaged over the intended use space of at 3 different levels, 108 points, what was the average par inside this box? When it's spread out, not just laser beamed at the bottom, but I'm thinking about it at multiple layers, cost per par, and how I'm actually going to use this thing. The radions actually was like amongst the lowest. It was like number 2 or 3.
In the top 5, yeah. Both of them, the pro and the blue.
Yeah, so like the best actual for the dollar as well, which was, we had to redo the numbers, man. Like I went and saw it, and like, there's no way. Nobody looks at the radio and says, well, of course it's the best. But nobody would come back and look at it and say,
it's the lowest cost per par.
Lowest cost per par. What? Nobody anticipated that. And so part of it is they use the right ratio of LEDs, and so you can actually turn them all to 100% if you wanted and use it and look at it and say, well, that looks like a nice tank. where I'm not turning half of them down to 20%.
Yeah, exactly. So we just said that there's what sells, there's what looks awesome, there's what grows corals. The next hard lesson here is that's in the wrong order. It's is this for me or is it the coral? And that's like that decision you said. If you were to, put two tanks together side by side, gorgeous looking tanks, and on one side you had this big bulky hood hanging over. I can see the wires hanging up to the ceiling. Or on this other tank over here, I had nice, sexy little modules, evenly spaced across the tank, barely any cords to find. Which one would you choose? Well, that's a decision that's a decision I'm making for myself, not what's best for the pets that I'm trying to keep, because we are trying to keep pets. So when you think about it in that order, there's what grows corals, what looks awesome, and then what sells.
I would love it if what sells was last.
Oh, yeah.
Like what grows corals, what looks awesome, then what sells, the priority. It isn't. It's actually in the reverse.
Once you checked box 1, move on to box 2.
But it's demand from the community that will change that. We have to ask for what we want, or nobody will ever give it to us. All right. So, and I think that relates actually to that aquascape thing. You mentioned this earlier. Like when I build an aquascape, we said the other day, like an aquascape is for my eyes, a habitat is for the animal that lives in there. So the light is the same thing. Am I doing it for my eyes, or am I doing it for the animal that lives in there?
Yeah.
Okay, so another hard lesson. Compact light sources have a ton of visual or usability advantages, but not really ideal for a photosynthetic application. Okay. So again, if you have a bunch of them overlapping the cones.
Compact light source meaning like your LEDs or your pucks that are about like this.
Super small. Yeah. They do work when you have a bunch of cones, but if I'm just going to use one, there aren't many photosynthetic applications that anybody would use that for. Right? It doesn't matter if it's horticulture or,
Unless I'm trying to light only one single object that's about the size of my thumb, then this one compact source of light might actually work for that.
Most of the time when you see those compact light sources, it's because they mounted, like in horticulture, they mounted them 6 feet above the light, and there's a million of them.
Yeah, exactly.
They're overlapping each other.
Yep.
All right, so another hard lesson. Par wars and narrow angle lenses set the hobby back. Let's embrace that fact. Par wars, trying to get the most par, like highest possible horsepower out of this thing, and the narrow angle lenses that focused it down to the bottom, prevented it from hitting the glass and bouncing back in, and getting good even spread. That era set the hobby back and hurt the trajectory of reefing. We're now correcting that.
This is probably where, and unbeknownst to a community who doesn't know better, or anybody who doesn't know better, this is probably where that disdain for LEDs comes from, and probably still lingers. Is that either maybe you saw somebody get burned by LEDs, you got burned yourself, or they just weren't working as well as metal halides and T5s. It's because we weren't building, and the initial outset of LEDs were not manufactured in a way that was coral forward thinking. It was how much par can I fit in there? How small can I make the form factor? And a good way, easy way to make the form factor small is by having narrow, small, close together LEDs. But in the end, that was the wrong direction from the outset.
Luckily, the thought leaders here are changing that trajectory, right? And so the new generations of these lights actually go in the entire opposite direction.
Yep, 100%.
And so now when you see it wasn't LED, there's not like some magic LED photon.
There's no magic T5 photon.
Magic T5 photon, it's not that. It's this, the technology wasn't being used right. Yeah. And so and it wasn't embraced in the same manner of T5s. Like, do it this way and you'll be successful, right? That is the baseline that we need here, which is, and I'm gonna say it, like, we already know the par zones. We already know that LPS, man, 50 to 150, start at 50, work your way up, don't go the other direction. We know LPS or SPS, 200 to 350, start at the low end and work your way up, don't go the other direction, right? We already know horizon to horizon, wrapping the corals in light produces the best result. Unquestionably. We know that blending the spectrums into behaving like both the sun as well as older technology is the right ideal move. We already know these things. Let's implement them. Let's demand themselves from ourselves and the people that supply products for us as well.
That's our core belief at the top of this episode was LEDs are the solution to our lighting, but we're making something super easy extremely hard.
It's because we're not united as a community. We're still having these like separate little conversations all over the place. So let's take the things that matter the most. You don't have to agree with everything that we say here, but like, you know, take the things that you buy into and let's march forward to a better world. So another hard lesson is related to this, which is knowledge transfer is the only thing that will change the demand in what is made. You know?
If we are united as a front in asking LED manufacturers to make that choice of what sells, what looks awesome, and what grows corals, and reverse that so we're thinking about our pets and our animals first. United front asking for that and transferring that knowledge of this is what we want, this is what we're trying to achieve. It's then when we will start seeing those massive changes.
And you've seen it, and this is the way that it usually goes.
We're starting to get there right now, too.
This is the way it goes, is all of the most expensive options that have the best engineers and the most tooling and the most resources will develop this for you. And so you see it in the Kessels, you see it in, I mean, AI and Ecotech have been doing lighting since, like, I think about the time that BRS existed.
Yeah,
like,
Gen 1s.
You know, 15 years. You know, so like they've been doing this forever, so don't be surprised that it keeps coming out of these companies as the thought leaders, right? And then you'll start to see the other places that don't have the same engineering expertise, they don't have the same R&D to start to emulate the things that come out of those environments.
So that only means inherently, that the technology, the proper technology, and what we're looking for is just going to get cheaper and cheaper. There's going to be more cost-effective options because, you know, once these ones are more successful and they're pioneering the path, and then there's people following along. A lot of the times those follow-along products are a little bit more cost-effective.
You're going to see this. You're going to see the cheaper options someday. Next 5 years or so, start to emulate the super wide angle approach from the Radions. If you're willing to wait 5 years, you'll probably save a few bucks. You'll see the caustic approach from the Kessel and the small little lights show up in different form factors probably. You'll see the wide panel light like the Sky and the Philips Coral Care. You'll see those things. Those are the future. All of those things are already here, and you're just going to start to see the others trickle one way into that direction.
So it's not everybody fall back on the T5 and metal halide technology, and
we're already beating it.
Yeah, we're already beating it. You just got to patiently wait it out.
You have to embrace it and then use the tool in the right way to try to achieve it. If you use the tool wrong, then we're not there. But if you understand what you're trying to do, we're definitely there. So, what's next?